right, well, welcome to the FHIR Analytics Collaborative Weekly Meeting. I thought we would start just with a little tiny bit of housekeeping because the to-do list that I collect over the weeks is just growing and growing. So if we could just take like a couple of minutes and go through and cut out some of that, I won't have to like cut and paste them. So I have that, and then I don't think we need to comment really on the work streams. They're kind of in flight, in progress, and then wanted to push it to you guys to see if you had any more progress on some of the stuff that you were working on, particularly Nikolai, your work on the client and reference implementation. Sound good?
Yep.
Anything else for the agenda from anybody else? Nope. Okay, cool.
Sounds good.
So I'm just going to go through these quickly. Let me share my screen. Let's see here. Should see my window there. Okay. So pretty small. Recruit all workstream leads. That should just be ongoing. Hold on a sec. One moment. Can't really take notes. Okay, so recruit all workstream leads. Yeah, just everybody tell your friends. And Nikolai, test with ClickHouse. Is that still a thing?
Yeah, I'm going to do this after I finish with some basic implementation of API.
All right, sounds good. Next one is for me and kind of for John. That was that idea of going through the Parquet on FHIR documentation and adding use cases, scheme profile levels. It's been a couple of weeks. Where's your head at on that?
Probably in exactly the same place it was a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I think I went through most of what you'd done. I think I still need to make some more updates, and if anyone else has any input, and then I think we just add it like as a kind of preamble to the existing spec doc. I think that's a really good addition. And thank you so much for your help on that, Arjun.
Yeah, for sure. I think just remembering from a couple of weeks ago, I thought we had, I think we had a little bit more ambitions here in terms of, you know, use cases and things like that. I'm gonna have to go back and refresh my memory on them as well. But maybe we'll start with the process that you laid out, like kind of refine what we have right now, and then take a fresh look at it. How does that sound?
Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. Next, Gino, some of this is like AI generated, so, you know.
No, this is exactly, I know the task and I would have worked on it, but I have been underwater, some R6 stuff that Graham asked me to do, and it was all the tickets that we hadn't implemented because they were extraordinarily painful. So we've been having a lot of fun with those, but that has chewed up all of my time because we need to get the ballot published.
Yeah, understood. You know, some of these things will definitely get kicked back for sure. So I'll keep that one on the calendar.
So yeah, as soon well, I won't say as soon as I'm done with the cross version stuff after the R6 stuff, this is the next on my list.
All right, sounds good. Brian, create packages summary. I'll at least mention this to Brian. I don't think it's really high up on Brian's radar, but I'll talk to him about it. Next one is for John, create demo script for Parquet implementation. Any comments on that one?
Yeah, I think this is another demo that doesn't exist yet. So I've done a couple, but I think this was about modifying Black Quack to demonstrate that we could do the same thing in DuckDB. So I think that's still a thing. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to keep that one there. Then I might reorganize these a little bit to make them a little clearer, group them by person. Add Gino to the calendar invite. Gino, you're here, so I'm guessing this one is okay.
Yeah, I mean, I just have my own again, but it still isn't reminding me for some reason. I don't know why. I'm not getting my reminders, but I just set an alarm.
Was that a fail on my part not to add you? I think it was. Just add it to the list.
No worries. I made it.
Yeah.
Right time this week.
I feel we advertise when this meeting is pretty effectively. So it's kind of like I feel like it's on the
yes,
on the participants.
If I could suggest, if you use the time tag on Zulip, then the time will show up in people's, like when you're just typing, type less than time, and then you can put a time zone aware time. So what happened to me is I was just reading and saw the 3, and I know it's not my time zone, but all I remembered was the 3. But yeah, if you do the time tag, then you can show time zone aware times.
All right, good tip. I'll I'll put that into my repertoire of Zulip Markdown. All right, so some of the stuff I think was generated from Circleback. Gino, send Nikolai, FHIR working group meeting. That was I think it was post the recording.
Yep, that we did. I did send you all the info though, and it's FHIR. Yeah, that's funny. FHIR is in
FHIR.
infrastructure. I love it.
I like that. I like that
I'm gonna see if we can change our work group name.
That's a nice name. FireEye is watching you.
As someone who actually reads all of the transcripts every week, there's some implement reference client. So we'll talk about that. Obviously, implement export operation. We'll talk about that. Me again, parameters API review sheet. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I'll keep that on. John, example of multiple view definition use cases. I think there's a sorter maybe related to something else. Keep or kill. What do you think, John, for this one?
I think there's a broader action to add use case information to the draft API spec.
Okay. Let me API information use cases. Right. So let me expand that a little bit. Maybe it's not specifically on you. Maybe I'll expand. I mean, you have another one right here too. I know we're piling on as usual. Dry run, pre-flight count only API options.
Yeah, I think this is kind of in a similar category.
Which is really develop the, move the API spec forward, right? So they got broken out as smaller tickets, but hey, sounds good. We are essentially going to keep, I think, all of them. I'll reorganize this to make it a little more useful. All right, so that's what I wanted to do. I don't think I have any other agenda items, but yeah, still moving forward, talking with a number of people, sort of as people come in, talking about the SQL on FHIR group, went to the FHIR dinner, I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. A lot of interest across the board, and I think starting to penetrate a little bit into people's minds, but this is something we want to come up with more and more. And I'm reaching out to people for help on this too. So it's not just on me in terms of the marketing side, things like that. So everybody good with that? Any comments on the administrative side or any other work streams? Oh, and Gene is on the call. Actually, I don't know, Gene, if you can talk because you said you were in the car, but if you can, it might be good opportunity just to introduce yourself to the group. So I met Gene, I think we've crossed paths before, but I met Gene at the FHIR dinner in DC a couple of weeks ago. We sat next to each other, hit it off, and he's, I think, going to be a great collaborator in the group. So over to you, Gene.
Yeah. Thanks, Arjun. Yeah, it was really nice meeting you. I am eager to see where I can help this group and this initiative. Just a little bit about myself is I came from Be Well, Connected Health. So in the last 3 years, I was building interoperability, FHIR platform, utilizing all sorts of different FHIR functionality. Part of it was the analytics on FHIR, running, flat JSON data, CQL and all that good stuff. So I have a lot of ideas that we discussed with Arjun, potentially like use case and implementing those to make it easier for companies to consume, like FHIR data and US core, things like that. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where I can help.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Gene. Yeah, welcome to the group. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Nikolai.
So let's jump to the code. Okay, so I sketched export operation and there's a lot of questions, and it's nice that we have Gina so we can solve probably some of the questions. So just quick walk around there's a server.js in reference implementation, which is just simple Express server, Node Express server. So I did some refactoring and I started working on export endpoint. So as I explained it before, it serves some like canonical resources like capability statement and operation definition just from the folder, which is right here. That's just a teeny code which is serving. So Gina, I don't know, you wasn't on the last meeting, yes? So we decided to make discovery of ViewDefinition through the capability statement using resource type ViewDefinition, which is a little bit against what like you, because it's not yet like official resource, yes. But Graham said he is doing this all the way, so we decided to do the same. I don't know. Do you have any comments about this?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely we're on the bleeding edge of what we're trying to define for R6. So I think picking an approach and trying it and I would ask to make sure you keep track of what works and what doesn't. So, and when you have thoughts on things like how are we going to support two different versions of ViewDefinition? Do we want that to have a version explicit? Some of those types of things that we can use to hopefully help steer what ends up in R6.
We're going to be backward compatible forever, so we don't need a version. Yeah. So, yeah. Otherwise, we will introduce new resource type.
Sure,
Yeah,
but
so
for everyone's not using Clojure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's our initial decision. Yes. So that's how discovery should happen. So people go to the capability statement. If they see that there is a resource type ViewDefinition, then they can like look into interactions. So it's classical FHIR discovery, and we have a two operation like export and the run. So the export is a synchronous operation, it's a bulk export, and the run operation is a synchronous for debugging, mostly instance level operation for the ViewDefinition to debug how they work. But maybe it will be useful for other use cases as well. So like exporting, like running ViewDefinition on top of just one patient scope, so not so much data, and we can do this synchronously instead of asynchronous stuff. As well, there's a big topic about parameters. And there's some tension because the FHIR bulk export API doesn't use FHIR parameters resource, but we think this is a good fit for our export operation. So, but before that, there's a question. Yeah, so I can show you maybe. Yeah, before we will dive into this question, I will show you that I'm working on the tests. So this is a simple test. I will abstract them with a like base URL. So people will be able to run this exactly test on their own implementation. So for now, it's just testing capability statement, not deeply, just it's return it, but yeah, I will write that it will test that ViewDefinition is present. Then we discussed that the discovery of what specific ViewDefinition are supported by server can be done through the standard search. So if server do support a write operation for ViewDefinitions, so that should be stated in capability statement. So, and this is just for the test server, probably this should be removed. I just like testing that I can serve the data, and I'm serving data from indy.json file, like for the views, for this teeny server. There's I start writing export test, so this is more interesting. So here we're starting with export, we're sending parameters resource, we're saying name of the view, but we refer view by. And this is the first question. So we have many ways to refer the ViewDefinitions. And Gina, is parameter resource kind of polymorphic? So can I say value reference, for example, or value URL like an extension? So we can support both, like direct value URL is going to be like canonical URL, or we can reference specific resource by ID on the server.
Yeah, not in the same.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so it's going to be like another parameter, but
yes,
but it will work. Yeah.
Yeah, I would personally prefer having them have different names. Just for myself as someone who writes code, just if you wanted to have view URL and view canonical, just because then you switch on the input instead of switching on the input and then switching on the type that you discover back from saying the parameter. But that's a style preference thing more than anything.
So, and if we will, okay, so that was my another question. So if we will make it different names, so then we don't have to like profile what the type of the parameter resource. But another question, what is the best way to describe this parameter resource with the FHIR? So should I write like profile on parameters resource, or there's another way to describe the shape of the parameters and like?
Yeah, you can do a profile on parameters. That's the simplest way to do it.
And then how will I tell this in operation definition so that I'm using specific profile on parameter?
I don't know that there's actually a way to say it there.
Because it's quite common pattern for operations and FHIR to accept parameter resources, yes?
Yeah, operations, that's in general when you do the operation definition, there's a whole set of rules. Where are they? Talking about how you evaluate and when you use parameters and when you can use post versus when you can use get, and if it's idempotent or not, and all that kind of stuff. So the base of all operations take in parameters when you do post. It's just that you can also inline as HTTP parameters if they're simple types and blah, 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 blah.
But there is no, like, for now, official way to say that I do support like body parameter in a body with a specific profile.
So when you look at operation definition, on the type, you can have a profile in a specific parameter. But if you're, it's a common thing that's come up, and I don't think we've actually addressed it yet. But you can see on an individual parameter, you can put target profile.
Target profile.
But,
Okay.
yeah. And same thing with type and allowed type and all those things. So you can play with some of those. We don't have a good way of linking an overall parameters profile into that yet. And I know it's come up a few times, but I think it's been so far said, oh, I take that back. It's been added in build. Input profile and output profile are there now.
Input profile. But what would the right way to describe that I'm expecting parameters resource in the body with a specific profile? Should I like give it some?
Yeah. So if you go instead of the R5 build, if you come to this guy, the CI build, and then look at operation definition.
Okay.
So now you can see right above parameter, there's input profile and output profile. So that's giving you the profile that you would use on parameters.
So this is okay. This is a profile for parameters.
Yep.
Okay. And for the earliest version of FHIR, we can probably use some kind of extension to represent this. Cross extension.
Maybe a cross version extension. Should those be published?
It's gonna be like input
profile.
Sorry, I'm just trying to follow this. Why do we need a profile on parameters?
Because that will establish what the actual input slices each parameter is, and if you want specific types, and if you want to enforce profiles on those types and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, John, so let's take a look. So we want to like describe the shape of these input parameters that we do support, like name view canonical, which should be type of URL. It has a nested, for example, the format parameter. And we want to describe this machine readable format. And this is Gina suggests to do this as a profile on parameters resource. So we will have
I was just trying to figure out what the part of this that you can't do within the operation definition is. Because
we could not say that the operation expecting in a non-6 version, we could not explicitly say that we expecting parameter with this profile. And in R6, there's a special field which says that it could be like input profile should be like this. We can call it like parameters, for example, export parameters.
You're right, John. The information that you can put in the operation definition pretty much mirrors exactly what shows up in the parameters profile as far as putting the actual parameter, value types, all that information. What a lot of people found is they can't validate against that, and they don't have good examples on how to actually create the parameters resource. So when people are spinning up as developers trying to generate the parameters that you pass in, instead of making them go read your operation definition and pick apart all those pieces, if you publish a profile, people are already very familiar with all of that workflow.
And probably.
So do you have the same sort of information in both then, or do you just have? You do, yeah. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, it's annoying. It would be very much nicer if there was a way to circumvent that in operation definition, but it was already normative, and so we couldn't replace the parameter definitions there with the profile. We could only add the additional slot for the profile.
Okay, because you could almost validate parameters against an operation definition by kind of deriving a profile and then running it through the validator. It's like
But like if you're talking about parameters inside operation, it's much more limited than what we can do with the parameters. There is no nesting. There is a very few data types. Like I'm not sure, but it's probably there is no complex data types, Gina, or there's some.
There are. Yeah, what actually ends up getting put in operation definition is essentially a parameters. And it's actually defined, I'm thinking it's actually literally uses the metadata type of parameters parameter.
And you can do nesting, right? That
Yeah, because you can do parts. That's what I'm saying. I think it actually uses the metadata type of parameters.parameter in operation definition. I just don't have one up right now that shows if it's true or not. But you can see the part. That part comes back to the same thing again. Yep.
So it's
oh, I guess that would tell us if we link.
And the type could be any. So it's they like duplicate each other, yeah, the parameters and.
Yep. It's exactly the same thing as a parameter. That's why if we could go back in time and change how operation definition works, this would just be a parameters and you could profile it and do the whole thing. But we can't.
But what the recommended way from your point of view, like having profile on parameters or doing?
I can say I put a link to the one in the backport IG. People like having the profiles, so I've had to generate them for different things because if you don't, people end up asking for them anyway. If you have something that's more complex, a simple operation that only has 3 parameters, who cares? You're fine.
Okay.
But when you start talking about things like, and especially when you want to say things like, well, we have value URL or value canonical. Well, we probably want to say in the profile, we can put an invariant saying that you can't have both. There's no way to put that in here.
Okay.
So there's more you can express there that you can't express here on that side.
so you kind of got an example of where you've done operation definition and generated profiles in addition to that.
I think so. I'm very behind on some of my editorial tasks on the backport IG since that one doesn't have a deadline and I want cross versions done. So I just grabbed one of the random profile definitions from there to show as an example because they render nicely and they show all that stuff. So I'd have to go look to see which one matches profile. I don't know if I bothered.
Profile is it collection or just one profile?
Just one.
Okay.
It's one that applies to all of the input and then one that applies to the output.
But we definitely need like output profile and with the operation definition, so that I should, like, if I want to describe input and output, I should put this use in and out. Yeah.
You have to put, yes. So you're only allowed, and that's why there's a whole description of this with examples, because I had to write a bunch of examples. Essentially, you're allowed one output because that's describing what your output is. If you put multiple, you can't use out unless if you are a search type. You are allowed multiple outputs, and then it's a parameters by default if you define it that way. Input, if you have a single one, it can just be a resource so that you can directly post a resource. And if you put multiple, then you can't do that anymore, all that kind of stuff.
Because we want to describe output as well. And we probably want to describe this as a parameters. And so I don't know how to show it, maybe in a specification. So what we were discussing, that the bulk expert starts, let me see. We want to describe the status and the final result as a parameter as well. So something like this. So at the end, you will have the output parameter with what was exported, with the time we spent, with the output where you see what view was exported, the size of the batch, and probably the URL where you can get the data. And probably we can put here the format parameter.
Is that size number of records or file size?
It's just example now, so we can work on it, but ideally we can probably describe the format and add more and more. Yeah. So and it for me it looks better than custom JSON, which guys are using in bulk export, because again
a lot of the things in bulk, because it's the same story with a lot of the things in FHIR. It's that the projects were just old enough that there wasn't good functionality for doing a lot of these things, and then once you've done it a certain way, it's pretty hard to get everyone to change their production implementations just because.
Yeah, but what are your recommendations for if we're starting from scratch now? Should we use parameters for in and out, create profiles? So Is
I
it...
that's what I would do. I'm not any authority on that.
Yeah. I mean, just your opinion.
Yeah, my opinion is, yeah, I would definitely use the parameters. I use a lot of parameters for that kind of thing. With all the changes in R6, I might start arguing to say use logical models directly, just like we have ViewDefinition, because if we have good interoperability, then we can, and tooling around building them and everything else, then hopefully people, when they're using the Java stack or the .NET stack or different things like that, will just be able to treat them as resources.
Yep.
Even if they're non-persisted resources like parameters are today. So, that to me opens up a whole new fun set of things, but there's no functionality for it today.
Yeah, I think it's completely uncontroversial to use operation definitions and parameters, particularly for this, for this export stuff. The interesting part is what the other part that you were talking about, Nikolai, is representing like tabular output as parameters, which is like the next bit. But this is just an operation, right? It has to be a FHIR operation definition and parameters, really, in my view. And that this is like pretty straightforward to represent this as such, right?
Yeah, I think the trick to me is for the output, for instance, instead of a parameters, if we're trying to do some tabular data that would make more sense, if we can define a logical model for that, operations cannot return resources today. Like your return can just be a patient resource or a organization or whatever, or a bundle. And so if we're saying, we want to return a bundle of output results and we have a logical model that describes that, that's something we need to add as this process, like we're saying that we have view definition in the capability statement. We're going to have to be able to return a view definition from an operation or pass it into an operation. And so that would be one of my questions, is just if we're doing some sort of complex structure, would we want to model it as a logical model and then use that as a resource return instead of a parameters return?
Yeah, for return, to be honest, like I think like the most popular would be like CSV, Parquet, or something like this, which is not. But we can deduce from view definition the logical model. And
I was saying for the output itself, instead of returning this parameters that has all these outputs with the names and parts and everything, we could define a view run response logical model that has the structure you want, and then we can return that from the operation.
Okay, but
that's not supported yet today, so that's
But I still feel that parameters for such stuff is quite nice. So it's quite easy to write helpers to access some parts of parameters. So on the user code base, it will look almost like it is resource. Yes, you just say, give me view or URL or name, stuff like this. And you don't have to like generate types for that. So and we can easily add extra parameters. So to be honest, I like parameters for input and output. If we will provide some kind of profile so people who want can check them, and later, I don't know.
Yeah.
But this is a big question, because like creating logical model for that sounds like overkill for me.
Yeah, and well, to John's point earlier, if we define the operation, it should be fairly trivial transforms to output the profile, and it should be fairly trivial to output a logical model that does the same thing. So in theory, we can define whatever we want as the base artifact, and then figure out what we want to say, if we want to have profiles, I don't know why we don't have that tool already. So I'm going to make a note for myself for when I need a task switch, because we should just be able to make a profile from an operation definition. And similar, as we move forward with logical models, there's no reason why we wouldn't want bidirectional logical model and parameters, or the same way we want logical models in BASIC. So some of those things.
Yeah.
So question for Gino, how do you, in an operation definition, describe what gets returned from the operation? So you mentioned that it can be like parameters, it could be a resource, like maybe it's something else like a CSV file or something. Can you actually describe that in an operation definition?
Yeah.
It's like out and resource.
Yeah.
Oops.
let me find all of the relevant. This was a few months ago when we were doing all this. This is operations, I want to say.
The big problem if we're returning, for example,
There we go. Yeah.
something
So,
not like parquet.
On the operations page, that's where all of the rules for.
Maybe you can share your screen, Gina, and just illustrate it.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, maybe you can share the screen and
Yeah. Give me 1 second to set up screen share. My camera goes funny for a second. Window projector. And then I switch to camera again. And that way I can share projector. There we go. So, yeah. So in operations page, this is the one that describes all of those details we were talking about earlier. So how you actually evaluate an operation, where the post versus get, the rules for when you can do that, operations with no parameters, defining an operation. And so here you can see in the operation request, this was the first part we were talking about. You do an HTTP post, it's a parameters. In parameters are the named parameters. And then there's the search types if you want to do a search thing. And then this is what we were saying before. If the parameters are all primitive types and it's idempotent, then you can do a get and use HTTP parameters instead of a parameters resource. But by default, everything is a post with parameters. And then in the response section, this is the one that says, in general, an operation uses the same parameters if there are multiple named out parameters. But if there's only one out parameter and it has the name return, then you can use a resource. So you can just directly return an operation outcome, or you can directly return a bundle, or whatever you want to actually directly return.
Okay, so for the async, this is pretty straightforward because we return like references to things, like references to files or whatever, and you go and download them. For the synchronous, we need to kind of figure out how to represent whatever thing we're returning. So for the synchronous, you were saying, Nikolai, okay, well, we just want to run a view definition and we want to get back CSV like rows or whatever.
Yeah.
How does that fit into this? Because this kind of seems to say that it really needs to be represented as either parameters or a FHIR resource.
Yeah, that's my question, Gina. What if we're returning CSV or parquet? So how we can represent it in
Yeah, so there the trick is, where do you do that? You do that because
the type is FHIR
all of the types are optional.
Okay.
And so you can have operations that don't have types. I'm just trying to think of what actually gets described. And
Yeah, for example, like GraphQL operation doesn't return FHIR types. Yeah, so how is described?
Yeah, and that's
we kind of close to GraphQL because in GraphQL it's dynamic. You can define like it's defined by query.
Yes, GraphQL, and so then you can see the out is a result and it's a binary.
Okay.
Well, and that's the trick is because that is the interaction, and that's the thing that I was looking for, is then you start playing with the MIME type, because what you're saying is instead of returning a binary resource in FHIR JSON or FHIR XML, you can return a text plain that is the thing, or you could return, etc. So if you're saying you want that, then you're supposed to use those, the underscore format parameter for the MIME type, and or the accept header and things like that. So if you're saying I use the accept header to determine what's coming back, that's fine. Someone who's getting back, I don't know if there's a type CSV. Is there a specific one for CSV?
Yeah, there should be. For the parquet, there should be type.
So that's why you essentially what I think you want to say is, yeah, we're doing text CSV. So we're returning a CSV file. And if you ask for the response in FHIR, you'll get a binary resource, which is the CSV wrapped as a binary, or you could say it's an attachment if that's easier. I don't know the model exactly which one will look better for that kind of thing. But you say, yeah, if you get the FHIR response, that's what you're getting, or even a parameters. But then if you ask for it in HTML, you can get something different. If you ask for it in CSV, you can get something different. And if you ask for it in CSV and the server doesn't know how to return that, then you just get an error and that's it.
This still looks a little bit like a hack, yeah. Maybe FHIR needs something to, like, some extension to say that I'm returning not in FHIR type system, yeah, I'm returning.
Yes, I think
like,
that's definitely
fall back to HTTP stuff, yeah.
yes. And so that's why I would definitely say I would highly recommend if you can file a ticket on that, because really this is the one that's the problem.
Yeah.
I don't think we can change the required binding because it's a required binding on a code type.
But we probably can add extra like meme type and and say that one or another. Yes, because FHIR is living on top of HTTP. Yes, and in HTTP you describe with a content type what is your response. Yeah, content type is a good element which should be in output.
Yeah, and that's why that's another one is what is it? Convert. This one does the same thing. They talk about XML, JSON, and things like that.
Yeah.
But it also talks about converting documents and V2 messages. And it's like, oh, as a binary resource. Who's creating a binary resource around their V2,
Nobody.
LLP feed? It'd be much nicer to just be able to directly say, here is the thing. And I think most servers end up supporting it. It's just we don't have a way to describe it.
And the specification a little bit lying about GraphQL, because people returning the GraphQL JSON and they're not wrapping it into binary resource. Like at least our server doing this, because otherwise you will not work with the GraphQL clients.
Correct.
Because they're expecting like GraphQL JSON response. So, but okay, should we create this ticket for content type?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely.
The extension first.
Yes.
I thought the same as you, Nikolai, when I first saw that. I thought this is a lie. But actually, if you read the binary, the page on binary, it contains this whole section about like content negotiation to sort of serve things up as their native types and all the rest of it. So maybe that kind of does make sense. So if this is a binary, like you could serve it up as a FHIR binary, maybe you don't even support that. But if you pass like accept of whatever MIME type, which is exactly what you do in normal HTTP anyway. So accept text CSV or accept, whatever we choose to use as Parquet or whatever, then you just give it back as that content type. So maybe that does make sense.
Yeah, and that's why the binary is just the way you describe it there, but you can see they say the same thing here in the GraphQL one. Yeah, the only MIME type we support is application JSON. It is not FHIR JSON.
Yeah.
That's it. So yes, it's defined that it can return a binary and whatever, but no one is expected to ever support actually returning a binary resource.
And of course, because it's only the response, you don't actually necessarily need to support the binary resource in the server, right? So you don't necessarily need binary resources with an ID and a life cycle or anything. It's just you're really only using it as a way to describe the response as something that's not one of the other FHIR types and to access this sort of content negotiation functionality.
Yes. Exactly.
And we kind of, our run operation fit it very well because we can send accept header, and then we're describing output as a like special name return with the type binary. Yes, like well. So
yeah, this is actually wrong. This I don't think it's supposed to be result. I think it's supposed to be return. Where is it? Well, yeah, and I think I filed a ticket on that one before, and I just don't think anyone's done it yet.
Okay.
Because I went through and did a check of all of the operations at one point that had names other than return, because they're not supposed to do that. But that was a lot of stuff to apply, and I know I haven't applied them. So, yeah.
Okay, we're coming up on time. Is there anything else, Nikolai, you wanted to show for this week?
Yeah, I'm working. I will commit this code. So there another suggestion while implementation. So when we starting export operation, so the bulk export using location header and the status code like 202. I think that it would be nice to return parameters out body in JSON or some like XML, which will keep the same information. So we can put location into the body, because I understand that people likes working with the headers, but we can explicitly return what parameters was requested, and I don't know, maybe some extra information, including the like location you can pull for. This for me sounds quite like interesting addition. Not just use location header, but return it explicitly in the body with a, like with other stuff, maybe like export ID or something like this, some kind of meta information for the export operation, maybe even estimated time right after you requested export operation.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. For the async one, you're saying, yes?
Yeah, for async. So because we still have body, so we can return something. Why not return the location or maybe some extra information? I don't know what else information we can, again, like estimated time or or initial
I think that's reasonable. So you're talking about like the in progress status response and having an alternate representation of what's in the headers or perhaps additional information.
Yeah. So if we jump to the server, so for now I did it like this. So I'm returning export ID, I'm returning location and like input parameters. And later when you will query this, you will get the same plus extra information like status initially and then like output. So it could be the same parameters resource, which just getting more and more attributes while the export is progressing. And finally, when it has a status completed, then you can download.
So the intent is just to follow the async pattern within the FHIR spec, right?
Can you elaborate? So we don't follow async pattern?
So I think you do actually. So I just posted a link. Yeah, so in Pathling, we actually, we wanted to implement a operation exactly like this. We went to implement the async pattern. And the way I did is I just implemented it for all our operations and just, you know, if you send a header like, you know, prefer respond async, it just puts it onto a job and sends you back an in progress status and then eventually comes back with the response. So that's like a pattern that you can apply to anything really.
Yeah, sure. But I like make this addition that when you're starting a synchronous operation, you're getting like header parameters. When you're polling for the changes, we're adding to these header parameters extra information like progress and stuff. Even if we, for example, already exported one view, we already can like have a partial answer, so people can start working on it. But at the end, when the like status changed to the exported, you're getting the same parameters as you get at the beginning plus output like subparameters. So, and that sounds like uniform. So you're getting at the beginning, you're querying for the status, getting the same shape, and the end you're getting the same shape plus extra information. Or if there's an exception, then maybe there's a tension. So we may return operation outcome. I don't know. So that's we can discuss when it's failed. So how it should behave.
Yeah, and things like progress are really like currently just like an unstructured string, and it's kind of difficult to make it more than that because the way you implement progress can be somewhat implementation specific or like how you want to characterize progress and that sort of stuff. You know, for example, in Spark, like we get progress, it's like, you know, number of jobs that we know about and number of jobs that have completed, and you can kind of turn that into a sort of numpty, you know, percentage or something. But then if you had some other type of implementation, you might like have no progress information, or you might have a different way of sort of inferring it. And then like, how do you pick that up as the client? Like what do you do with it? Like if it's just a string, you can kind of just display it, or you can, if there's some sort of ideas about what should be in the string, you kind of parse it. So like, but it's kind of not very standard, is it? Like it's kind of just a string at the moment.
Yeah, but if we will model it as a parameters, so then we can like say that this is a number which is a percentage of the progress. Here is the estimated like completion time, so we can introduce like more detailed information. Probably people can use it. We can like even report which views already exported, yes, or the number of rows which are already processed, something like this, and the people can use these fields.
And they would all be optional, and so that way,
Yeah, they definitely going to be all optional. Yeah.
Clients
but-
need to handle that. You might get no progress, but then if you get a percentage, you can use the percentage. All that kind of stuff.
You have an estimated time. Yeah, you can show the estimated time, but the semantic could be much better than this just progress header with a string, which people will try to parse and do something.
Yeah, I'll say I like
that's
the idea of
interesting.
a parameters too, in case we want to end up adding more security stuff at some point, that you want to say like, here's an off hint or something that you need to actually retrieve the file. Having a little bit more flexibility on what we return there would be nice.
Yep. I think we only have a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good.
I will work on this implementation. So, and guys, you're welcome. So I will clean up a little bit code. So it's getting quite nice. And this is I really enjoy like thinking through the implementing. And if it's reference implementation and it's still teeny, people can read it. So, and we will get for free the reference client and tests with all of that.
Yeah, when you get to a point where it's good to share it out on Zulip, obviously. Yeah, just looking ahead to next week and next couple of weeks, is there anything on your mind or anybody's mind that we should sort of as a group be thinking of and be aware of?
If there's anything we need to schedule for Connectathon or work group meeting, or that people want to schedule, that would probably need to be relatively soon. I don't actually know any of the dates off the top of my head, but I don't know if people are planning on going to one, the other, both, neither. And then if we would want to have something at any of those, I assume people have already pitched that one. I know if you haven't pitched your Dev Days talks by now, then I think that ship has sailed. So
yeah, good point. I was having a discussion with somebody else who's not here actually about that. Nikolai, you're certainly going to Madrid, right?
Yeah, I'm going to Madrid.
Yeah.
To Amsterdam.
Yeah, I'll only be going to Amsterdam, but I know, maybe what I'll do is connect some people who I've heard are going to Madrid, certainly to have a birds of feather type session like we usually do during Connectathons, super casual, and I don't think it's going to require extensive preparation or anything like that. Maybe a little bit of an intro. We don't have an official track to the work and the spec, and then just find some time, grab a room kind of thing. I'll talk to the people I was talking to about that to help organize that. And then, similarly for Dev Days, I know folks have pitched talks. I have one that's an introduction. Maybe I'll ask the group just to send me everybody's talks. So
I'm going to present this progress on the API.
At Dev Days?
At Dev Days, yeah. And this is for me, so I think this would be very nice milestone if you have at least two implementation of it. So I can, for example, connect ViewDefinition builder, at least with the run operation. I'll make this like generic client for expert stuff. I don't know, John, what do you think? How much it will cost to implement at least some part of it? Like,
Yeah,
in 8box, I can do this in reference implementation, but it would be nice to have at least one more.
so this is like, is this May, June?
Yes.
It's
Dev Days is June 3rd.
Yeah, it's June.
Depends when your travel is, May, June.
Yeah. Okay. Let me have a think about that.
Doesn't sound too much effort, yes? So just at least the basic run operation for debugging.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. Let's aim for that. Yeah.
Okay.
John, but John, you're not going to either, correct?
No, I'm not. I'm not going this year, but that doesn't mean I can't support Nikolai to be awesome at Dev Days.
Yeah.
So I'll aim for that.
Yeah, we'll have like a
We'll represent the whole group.
a cutout, and So cool. No, good. That sounds good. Yeah, I'll help organize the collaboration on that.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
And
All right.
if Nikolai or anyone else wants time on a FHIR slot to present any of that kind of work, just as an update for
Yeah, I
whoever's there.
definitely would love to present in Madrid on FHIR, just to make people.
Just
Yeah,
put a request
that's-
at any time. We haven't
that's-
started the agenda yet, but
Yeah,
we'll get a quarter
that's
and
nice
you to see
idea,
when you
yeah.
can be there.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. All right. Good to see all of you. And thanks. Have a good week.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.